Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We now call to order this meeting. It is a South-South triangular cooperation to achieve substantive gender equality in Latin America and the Caribbean. This is being streamed through ECLAC's YouTube channel, and also the meeting will be recorded.
También queremos informarles que este evento
Let me also inform you that we have Spanish and English simultaneous interpretation for those who are here and those who are following us on virtual means. And let me first of all give the floor to Luis Yanez from ECLAC. Thank you, Nicole. Bir Katia Camerera from JIC Southern Cone, the Mexican Secretary on a Life Free of Violence from Mexico, Ingrid Gomez. Let me say that it's a pleasure to have you all here. We are together to talk about the South-South and Triangular Cooperation to achieve substantive gender equality in Latin America and the Caribbean. I'm very thankful for the foreign ministries, agencies, and cooperation organisms here present, and all of those who have cooperated. Let me say that we must wonder how to get gender.
La perspectiva de género no es agregar un componente ni mencionar la igualdad en un documento. Es preguntarnos desde el inicio y en cada etapa qué desigualdades queremos transformar, quiénes se benefician de nuestras acciones y cómo nuestras políticas pueden cambiar las relaciones de poder que reproducen esas desigualdades. Esta obligación y esta tarea no es del día de hoy. Todos los países de la región ratificaron la CEDAW y con ello se comprometieron a garantizar los derechos de las mujeres en igualdad de condiciones. América Latina y el Caribe tradujo ese compromiso en lo que hemos llamado la Agenda Regional de Género, y se viene construyendo peldaño a peldaño desde 1977 en la Conferencia Regional de América Latina y el Caribe, que fortalece su sinergia con la Conferencia Regional de Cooperación Sur-Sur, cuyos estados pidieron en el año 23 articular y profundizar las relaciones en estos dos espacios. La estrategia de Montevideo los estados fueron claros.
Was a key. South-South and Triangular Cooperation supplements the North and South Cooperation, but it will not replace it, but it's based on horizontality and not just mutual benefit. The Buenos Aires commitment reaffirmed that. And finally, last year, Locos that was adopted last night was a landmark. For the first time, gender was expressly mentioned in foreign policy. The idea was to mainstream that into diplomacy and to international cooperation with full participation of women as well as their leadership. This involves investment that is needed and appreciates all efforts for the advancement of women and the cooperation agencies. Latin America and the Caribbean is not starting from scratch. There are public instruments, learnings that can be shared for different places. South-South cooperation places that knowledge at the service of all, showing that there are very good solutions already available. Triangle cooperation adds something else. It coordinates capabilities and resources from different sectors, expanding the scope of these initiatives. The COPEV project is a concrete example with Chile, Colombia, Mexico, Germany, and with the said NGIC's cooperation. That was the first initiative of the Fund on Gender Equality and Feminist Cooperation, and the first triangular cooperation with the participation of ECLAC. We are very thankful for the German cooperation for that act of confidence towards ECLAC in opening up this way. Process was that made it all possible with a learning community, with dialogues and workshops between institutions with different experiences. we believe that three great contributions stemmed from that. First of all, the guidelines and action plan for mainstreaming gender in international cooperation, offering a conceptual framework and the methodology. Second, the tools that translate that into the practical lives with programs and projects. And thirdly, self-learning to strengthen foreign ministries and cooperation agencies. Thus, the guidelines bring in all the tools and the way and the resources allow us to make it all come true. There's a clear view to mainstream gender, but that requires political assistance, institutional capabilities, as well as a fourth condition, the continuity. The challenge is that this doesn't depend on individuals or special projects. It has to do with customs conducted by our institutions. But now we're living through a new geopolitical tension in the world with different situations. Thus, the feminist and feminist cooperation is a new way of thinking about the priorities, who to cooperate with, how to build partnerships, and what results we wish to find. If we have the regulation and we are able to coordinate with the others. But that connection can't just be coming from ECLAC. We need foreign ministries, cooperation agencies, civil society, and academia. We must go forward in three ways: recording the activities and measure results, getting a gender perspective in all manners, and cooperation as a joint use of different capabilities. Substantive equality doesn't just mean declaring rights, it means bringing in the conditions. International cooperation can help out through resources that can be at the service of national priorities, at the service of institutions, and the experiences of our countries for collective learning. Now, this should allow us to go forward into shared learning and cooperation in complete in Latin America and the Caribbean. Thank you for your attention.
Muchas gracias, Jesús.
Thank you very much, Secretary of the Commission. Now we would like to leave the floor to Katia Ahmed, Regional Director of GIZ for the Southern Cone. Thank you very much and good afternoon to all of you. It is a true honor to talk to you today in my presentation through GIC as the new Regional Director for the Southern Cone, in this instance that unites representatives from the region and ECLAC. I would especially like to thank ECLAC for hosting us and for the partnership that makes this possible. Everyone that is here also in person and those that have logged in virtually. Thank you very much. Latin America and the Caribbean have a singular tradition. It is a region that for more than 4 decades has built consensus around gender equality through its own intergovernmental mechanisms. This is today one of the most valuable assets of the region to face the global challenges that we all share. It is within that spirit of joint construction where I want to start. Triangular cooperation. In a context of international cooperation that is ever evolving, triangular cooperation is an innovative modality that has obtained a growing importance over the last years. It combines the complementary strengths of different partners that include, as appropriate, the private sector, civil society, and scientific communities to provide flexible solutions to the development challenges of all countries. It also strengthens cooperation among partners that have not always worked together. It does not only create impact at a project level, but it also strengthens broader associations in line with SDG 17 of the 2030 Agenda for partnerships to obtain objectives. But also to the extent that countries share their knowledges, we also see the promotion of horizontality and trust among them, engaging in dialogue with the appearance of the South-South cooperation that this region has built over the last decades. It is a model that Germany, through its Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development, supports with high convictions because it multiplies the value of all bilateral cooperations and it decisively contributes to the conceptual strengthening of that concept. That is not abstract. We see it reflected in the joint work that the governments of the region have been conducting over the last years to strengthen their foreign policies and their international cooperation. From a feminist perspective, the ministries of foreign affairs and cooperation agencies have advanced in building common frameworks, sharing best practices, and install capacities within their own institutions. I would also like to highlight something that is vital. This does not seek to only include gender perspective in cooperation programs that countries execute, but to transform the approach inside the institutions that are responsible for foreign policies. That is probably one of the most innovative supports that these communities and countries have built together. And it is something that you will hear about in greater detail in the upcoming session. From GIZ, on behalf of the Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development of Germany, we highly value being part of this process. Our development feminist policy requires us to support associations that strengthen autonomy and the full participation of women, adolescents, and girls in all their diversities. And we believe that the best way to do this is by accompanying, not leading, making available tools such as the Regional Fund for Triangular Cooperation with partners from Latin America, the Caribbean, and Germany, so that the countries in the region can define themselves their own priorities and build their own requests and responses. It ends with a condition. The challenges that gender equality face today, from economic crises to geopolitical changes, will not be solved in an isolated manner or in a unilateral way. They are solved by strengthening practice communities such as the one that summons us today, where the experience of a country becomes a learning experience to other, and where ECLAC plays an articulating role. I wish you a very fruitful workday. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Katia Cameron, Regional Director of GIZ for the Southern Cone. Now it is our pleasure to give the floor to Ingrid Gomez, the Undersecretary of the Right for a Life Free of Violence of the Subsecretary of Women of Mexico, country that leads the Regional Conference on Latin America in the Caribbean. She is joining us through WebEx. Ingrid, please, the floor is yours. Thank you very much. Good morning to all of you. I would like to greet Luis Yanez in Chile, Katia Kammerer, the Regional Director of GIZ Southern Cone, Ambassador of Mexico in Chile, Laura Moreno, and also my dear Ana Huesmes Garcia, the Director of the Division of Gender Affairs at ECLAC, and everyone joining us today. And those of us that have the privilege of joining this session today virtually. We're joined today to talk about something important for our region, and it seems that today the attempts to dilute it are almost becoming real. And I'm talking about diluting cooperation. I'm talking about diluting the collective advancement of the policies that have marked our region as, as a region that is a leading region, a feminist region, and that is highly committed with rights and the transformation of the lives of women. We are not only seeing this at a regional level, but also at a worldwide level. The agenda of women's rights that is facing threats of setbacks. In different parts of the world, we see how rights are being questioned. And those that came before us have fought for so intensively, and that will surely impact those that will come after us. This is a high concern to us because we cannot allow ourselves to fight for the spaces that we have already conquered and the rights that we have already conquered and obtained in Latin America and the Caribbean. Thanks to the organized fight of women, we have built, as acknowledged by Katia, but also mentioned by Luis, we have built one of the gender regional agendas that are feminist, that are undoubtedly most complex, but one of the most advanced ones in the world, with a Tlatelolco commitment together with the achievement of a substantive gender equality that reaffirmed the regional agenda on gender and established commitments to strengthen institutional capacities and mechanisms of follow-up that are necessary to advance towards substantive equality. And I agree with this. Substantive equality can not only be expressed in a constitutional article, as expressed already in my own country, Mexico. Substantive equality at a constitutional level, if it is not translated into transformative actions in the lives of women, where we were able to understand that inequality must be transformed. And as Katia was saying, it cannot be transformed in an isolated manner. We need cooperation, articulated work regionally, which implies sharing best practices, acknowledging them, because there's a lot of work to do and a lot of knowledge available. However, what still hurts us, the experiences that we have had, how we have organized ourselves in those pluricultural nations that we are part of as our own solutions and innovative solutions, but also with ancient knowledge and mostly what we can learn from each other.
This regional agenda was built by all states together, but it also has in mind all of those who were left behind, our ancestors, by the feminist movements in the region, and for all movements for the advancement of women, where we look at rights as commitments that we should not bargain and that cannot depend on political uh, terms. What we have already gained has already been a victory, and we are now, it's in our hands to change the lives of women, for all women, and for all rights. South-South and triangular cooperation can become that tool to strengthen our action, to foster public policies and actions, and to build answers as of our own realities that will truly impact the needs of our difficult realities in the region and in the global south as well. We have made progress in designing and implementing instruments as those already mentioned, but we still have to speed up the road towards substantive equality through deep transformations from a political, economic, social, cultural, and environmental standpoint. That means we must ensure full participation, effective, significant participation of women in international spaces where decisions are made. We must renew many of the items in the agendas and practices and instruments of international cooperation as well as diplomacy, including and mainstreaming the gender perspective as well as uh, having it as a cross-sectional topic, taking advantage of the experiences that women have in territories, in the colonies, in the neighborhoods. This should be seen as crucial. It should also be seen as transcendental. That is what we uh, do. And we evaluate, we assess all our actions in order to share, to articulate. That means that this should be part of the promotion of human rights, as well as processes such as the construction of peace, international security, climate action that requires our attention, and sustainable development, always ensuring the real participation of women where decisions are made. In view of the backtrack that we're facing, that is a challenge to us, we must respond with more cooperation, with more solidarity, and with more collective action. Latin America should continue to show that substantive equality, a life free of violence for women, are indispensable to build more just societies, to build peace, and to bring well-being for the region. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Ingrid Gomez, Undersecretary of the Right for a Life Free of Violence from Mexico. We now will hear about the presentation, guidelines and tools to go forward towards substantive gender equality from the International Corporation. Anna Wegs will be our speaker. She's the director of the Gender Division from ECLAC. Good afternoon, dear Luis Yanez, colleagues from ECLAC. I welcome Katia Cameron and all of the colleagues from GIZ, and naturally Ingrid Gomez, who is chairing the Women's Conference in the region, representatives from embassies, from international corporations, colleagues from UN, from civil society. And I know that there are many mechanisms for the advancement of women who are following us from different platforms. We have Mexico, we have Guatemala, Grenada, Venezuela, Ecuador, St. Vincent, the Grenadines, and they are all following us together with Brazil through the virtual means. I will be bringing a little part of our contributions. These are guidelines and tools that we have been developing throughout these years. And Luis Yanez was quite clear in his presentation. Not only do we need principles and guidelines, but we must also go forward in how to make it better and faster. That is really the question that is behind our work for the last few years. This conversation, it lies in an intergovernmental commitment that started, as we have already said, and thank you, by the way, for putting forward the gender on agenda, which is, and we're the only region that have had this kind of agenda. And we started in even more different context, but we always looked for a solution to go forward in towards a substantive equality and the care society. Tlatelolco is very important for that conversation because it sets the decade for 2535. We must speed up the transformations needed in the region. We don't start from scratch. All of the countries have ratified CEDAW and the main human rights conventions. We have a global agenda, but on a regional standpoint, indeed, we have gone forward in terms of rights, institutionality, and the agreements, but the inequalities continue. So the starting point of this collaboration has to do by saying there's no area in public policy that is neutral from the gender standpoint. Foreign policy, international cooperation, and funding of equality, they're all part of it. So we go forward towards the equality by the law. And we already heard that from Mexico. But we still have to go forward into substantive equality. In many areas, we don't have enough data to uh, see what's happening. And as much as we have more data and information, we realize that there is no area in development, in socio-economic fields that can skip talking about this. Now, in the region, aside from going towards substantive equality, we are uh, looking into the world, and this is seen by Tlatelolco, and that is the horizon having to do with the care society. That's a paradigm that the society is contributing to the rest of the world as a commitment towards peace, development, equality. And we started at the first World Conference in Mexico, where gender equality was not only a topic for women, but it also invited men to transform our societies, placing the care of persons and of the planet, planet at the center. We have many agreements, yes, but we have so many inequalities in the region that are crossing over with other inequalities based on ethnics, on race, in economic status, etc. That is why cooperation allows us to see how we can change institutions, priorities, resources, modalities. This project starts during moments when Germany has made a big change in its policies to go forward with goals, with targets, and with resources for equality. Now, what have we done with two subsidiary organs, such as the Conference on Women for Latin America and the Caribbean, and the conference chaired by Mexico, the Regional Conference on South-South Cooperation, to articulate
que estamos propiciando.
something that we are fostering. That is, with the mechanisms for the advancement of women, institutions of cooperation, cooperation agencies, the entities, and a decentralized cooperation, as well as the mechanisms for the advancement of women, which are the most important ones having to do with equality, but they are often not part of the agreement or the possibilities of cooperation between our countries. So we are contributing from both conferences to make headway. Now, in terms of the regional gender program or agreement agenda, let me say that one of the most important things having to do with implementation of Montevideo in 26 in 2016 talked about this and brought in non-conditionality and mutual benefit ideas that had already been mentioned in the South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation. At the Buenos Aires conference, we also saw that that idea was deepened. How to implement, that is, programs that will invest in gender equality and we saw the idea of the guarantee to the right of care as subject of cooperation and as something more and more important for the region. And finally, in 2025, in Mexico, we saw Tlatelolco commitment. And for the first time, we saw the inclusion of a mainstreamed agreement having to do with a gender perspective in foreign policy, including international cooperation. We also saw cooperation with that was articulated with funding uh, towards equality. So this was a clear statement, and we said that we had to go deeper into cooperation in South-South cooperation and the cooperation of women. That is the work that we have been conducting as technical secretary of these two conferences. Going forward, in close cooperation between national and international cooperation, financing for equality, and interinstitutional cooperation. Here, we see the beginning of the project that has to do with feminist agencies. Here we have the participation of Chile, Colombia, Mexico, Germany, and LAC. And here we have worked together with GIZ. And this has joined countries with a lot of experience and different paths. On some occasions, the countries were already developing that idea or were already participating in this project with all of the instrumentation that was needed. And let me say that, well, first of all, we already mentioned that the first measure of triangular cooperation on gender and feminist cooperation was this one. And I hope that many, many more will come forward. And the more countries we have that see gender equality as something mainstreaming, together with a cooperation project, we will be making a lot of progress. Secondly, a community of practice with the foreign ministries of these countries and the cooperation agencies. And here we have AXID, JIZ that were also part of it. And this catalyzed many processes that already existed in our countries. We saw the strengthening, well, as a result of this, we strengthened international coordination. We know that this takes a lot of time, but this is a path that many countries have already gone through. And receiving the feminist contribution, we saw a faster progress, a more structured progress. But all of the countries do have the obligation to go forward in this. Now, there are four dimensions, and this has to do with training, cooperation, foreign policy, and the collection of information and data. I think that this has been systematized and it will be shared, circulate. And today we will talk about three of the products. This is first the ISO project from the subsidiary organs that became products from all member states, and that is why we're bringing this forward. The idea is to go towards substantive um, equality in a faster way. Contributions, Luis Llani has already talked about something that we'll be bringing in today, those that have more to do with international cooperation. And by the way, there is another series of work being conducted, led by Mexico, having to do with women in diplomacy and international cooperation. We'll be bringing this shortly.
But now we will focus on these three products that have to do with the documents and those that you have available in your chat boxes and in your table, and I will introduce them briefly. They were based on the experience of the countries that are part of this initiative, but they were also extended to a set of countries in the region. The first one has to do with the guidelines. through the Secretariat and the Commission, we requested information, and it was very interesting because we received contributions from all the countries that you see on the screen: Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, Ecuador, El Salvador, Spain, Guatemala, Honduras, Mexico, Norway, Paraguay, Peru, the Dominican Republic, the United Kingdom of Great Britain. Also from UN Women, UNDP, and the ILO, with the cooperation of the Foundation of Science and Politics and Germany, SWP, and also BMZ, GIZ. Basically, what they all say is that there should be a double-way strategy with more investment in projects that have a goal to have gender equality, and we need to move forward in mainstreaming gender perspective in the different phases, processes, and cooperation modalities for development. This is the organization chart that we introduced in the document. The first phase has to do with the definition of policy and the cooperation strategy, the institutionalization, general guidelines where we review commitments, the stakeholders consultation. The second phase is defining priorities, the portfolio of projects and programs, and how to strengthen capacities. The third phase is the life cycle of programs and projects from their design to their monitoring and closing. And the idea, and this is something that we discussed in our community, is how gender perspective starts from the beginning, not at the end of the project, not with a specific question, but organically during the entire planning process. And of course, monitoring and evaluating to improve what we do and institutional decisions. We needed to see how to work with it, the situation of each country, where all their own mechanisms and developments are, the situation of agencies, cooperation agencies in the region, which are working systematically on improving their own instruments. And another topic that we discussed before with Manuel Novoa is how this is not only in the diagnosis phase, because we have the principles and such, that's fine. But where we want to see gender perspective is in the implementation phase, in monitoring and assessment, in the closing, and how to be more detailed with baselines, smart indicators, clear goals, with terms, etc. And also how our institutions have expertise or experts panels to join these processes. Because as we were saying, in many countries, mechanisms for women many times have a more recent institutionality. So how we can include the expertise that countries already have in cooperation tools and activities. This was the idea. The second document that we created has to do with how things are being done, which documents we have, which tools we have, applicable and existing resources. We have also tried to systematize scattered resources and consolidate tools. Many of these tools, this is something where we invite cooperation agencies to make them public. There are good tools available, however, many times they're not published. And therefore, it is important to start sharing these tools in institutional contexts, and also how to collect guidelines with actions. This document was already presented and was already delivered in the conference of the South-South cooperation that was recently held. What we saw is that there are examples where we can advance. For instance, the definition of policies and cooperation strategies, the feminist foreign policy of Mexico, or the first action plan of women, peace, and security held in Colombia that has cooperation elements. We were able to do a study tour in this project. Chile also updated its action plan for women, peace, and security. Spain has an experience with the directive plan, with cooperation in global security, agreed by all the partners in cooperation. We also believed it was important in the face of the project portfolio definition, the gender marker, which is being done together with Chile and Mexico, with strategic priorities of international cooperation developed by Uruguay. In the program cycle phase, there is an experience such as the guideline to mainstream the gender approach policies, programs, and services of the Foreign Affairs Ministry of Chile, with the guidelines to create projects in Dominicana, also the cooperation strategy, a toolbox of South-South cooperation that has been done with Colombia because they play a double role as an offerer and a recipient of cooperation, and also an instrument of triangular cooperation from Costa Rica. All of these elements and some more, which will be discussed later on, the idea is to update this toolbox every 2 to 3 years, because most of these instruments are not long-standing. These are instruments mostly from the last decade, although some countries have more years involved, that are the main axis of cooperation. And the last element, where we're quite pleased to have it, it is a legacy, and we have developed it in this project together with ILPES from LAC, and it's a legacy. This is the self-learning course, which complements the previously presented documents. It provides a training for, and it is intended for the workers of the Ministries of Foreign Affairs, cooperation agencies, mechanisms for the advancement of women, and other stakeholders that want to work in this agenda. It lasts for approximately 25 academic hours. It is self-manageable. It has 7 modules, including videos, reading material, questionnaires, and it includes a certification from ECLAC for those that complete the course, and also help us to continue improving future versions. As final remarks on this part of my presentation, I would like to say, and this is something that was said strongly by ECLAC's executive secretary, cooperation and collaboration are probably the greatest counterweight against a world that is more defined with power and force. Ingrid Gomez was saying this. In this context, more cooperation, more collective action, more state, more public policies, that means bringing in this transformation into international action. We are in the decade of action. It already started, and we need to work with structural solutions because inequality in our region is structural. But we must also consider that the long term starts now. We cannot wait to have concrete solutions for transborder and international problems that we are currently facing. Therefore, we need to work on the house, from social dialogue, from multi-stakeholder action, governance, cultural changes, which are very important, international cooperation, funding, and break the statistical silence. This is also something systematic that we have done at ECLAC. make available data, inequalities, and very thorough work with the member states to have official information. The double way approach, how we're working with measures and policies, strategies, and priorities, but in all areas and in the entire cooperation cycle. Not everyone is an expert in everything. That's why it is important to separate expertise in the green funds and climate agendas, in agendas related to migrations, administration. As we said, there are no areas of international cooperation that are neutral. And we make more effort in social areas, productive areas, environmental areas. That has started to change. And we have mainstreaming of gender perspective in the Escazú Agreement, which was an initiative that was led by the countries in the region. We need to continue advancing with greater articulation with international cooperation to fund inequality. It is not a matter of just approving agreements. Our commitment is measured on how we focus our resources and establish our priorities. Finally, triangular South-South cooperation offers a privileged instance to continue reinforcing this practice community, to continue advancing in the Tlatelolco commitment. And as I was saying, substantive gender equality is an obligation in all countries in the region, and it also implies a change in paradigm. And we're just coming back from the Regional Conference on Population and Development, where we talked a lot about demographic intelligence and how to face the aging phenomenon that we're experiencing in the region and other challenges and regarding demographic trends. And it was highly appreciated by all countries, meaning the importance of developing policies and systems of care, with good news in that respect. So we are traveling through turbulent times, geopolitical tensions, and cooperation helps to the friendship of peoples, collective action. And I would like to close with a phrase of the Executive Secretary of LAC. It is time to make strategic investments and public policies to advance towards substantive gender equality and the society of care. Here you can see several of the documents that we have been discussing, and all this information, apart from being recorded, will be available in our website that we have set up for this activity. So please follow us also in our social media accounts.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Ana Wasi, Director of the Gender Division from ECLAC, for your presentation with the guidelines and the toolkits, part of the COPA project that serves the countries in the region. We now have time for presentation from the audience, both those who are present as well as those who are listening from the streaming. So the floor is open. Let's start with those who are physically here with us. You may raise your hands.
Sí, por favor.
Please go ahead and introduce yourself. I'm Nicole Macy from the Mexican Embassy. Let me insist, and by the way, thank you, Anna, for your presentation. Let me insist in appreciate this project that came about, I think, in 2024. We've been working for 2 years now, and this is I'd like to insist on what has been accomplished. That is the convergence of two subsidiary organs, such as the Regional Conference on Women and that of South-South Cooperation, that led to these pilots that we've been hearing about, where much work has been conducted. I'm sure that this will be shared and be very useful for all of the countries in the region. This is another example of what can be done with the articulation of a mechanism towards the equality of women. As Anna said, it's nothing in isolation. And as examples, and thanks for this articulation, we have the gender statistics meeting and the guide for mainstreaming gender in Escazú. So I'd like to thank for this space. And I thank on behalf of Mexico for GIZ cooperation. And I also thank the cooperation of foreign ministries, of cooperation agencies. And something important in the project was the participation of the diplomatic institutes from Colombia, Chile, and Mexico. That's just one example of what can be done. As at the end, the Secretary Ingrid well said, in view of the challenges, well, more cooperation, more interaction. So it's very good to hear about the availabilities offered by the German corporation to participate in projects such as this one that have to do with gender equality. And we will certainly be talking to bring in something else in the future. Thank you, representative from the Mexican Embassy in Chile. Are there any questions, comments?
En formato virtual.
Let's see if there are any questions from abroad.
Bueno, si no hay... Sí, adelante.
Please go ahead. Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Paula Cepeda. Let me first of all congratulate you for these efforts and thank you so much, Anya, for that presentation on the progress and on the three products that have been developed. This shows the commitment to go forward in articulation, everything having to do with the gender. And I really enjoyed when you started saying this is not just a women's business, but it also belongs to our societies. I'd like to talk about two topics. First, the importance to bring in actions that have made progress, and we should also talk about other topics where we have stepped backwards. Migration, for example, is a topic where we are seeing strong steps backwards, especially in women's rights and the equal inclusion. Here at OIM, I'd like to say that we'd like to bring in some recommendations, such as the expansion of investment in the regular migration routes, trying to work on the critical nodes that the migrant women are facing in the region, especially everything having to do with violence and discrimination and lack of working educational opportunities, lack of support networks, precarious salaries, and the dependency on remittances. And I would also like to say that as of OIM, we have conducted an foresight exercise looking at different scenarios and remember we also heard about a lack of data. We have been able to analyze a new economic progress, demographic changes that is so important here. as well as the increase in the reverse migration and the return of migrants. This is a big change from the past, meaning that there is a internal displacement towards intra-regional migration. This is something that must be considered. People who move around, when we talk about South-South cooperation, is taking place within the region from one country to the next. And the migratory policies, uh, aside from the lack of security and the problems involved that affect mainly women and girls in transit and human trafficking. These are the ones most affected, and they are also the ones most affected due to climate change. These are some of the elements that we'd like to share as part of the South-South cooperation subjects. Many countries have already expressed their concern in this. Thank you. We now hand over to Ana Lopez from Guatemala and Women's Affairs Department.
Muy buenas tardes.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Thank you. I'd like to thank LAC and all of the organizers for the organization and for the invitation for us to be here on behalf of Guatemala. This event is extremely important for us because we agree, well, for Guatemala, we are taking one step ahead in this. We are pretty young in terms of care systems, but we are taking it up with responsibility. I'm talking about the commitments acquired in Mexico, having to do with Tlatelolco. And here, at country level, we are already having an interinstitutional mechanism involving entities from the executive. And here we are giving support on the importance of implementing public policies, as we heard about the sixth Latin American and Caribbean conference that was held last week in Montevideo. It's important to have not just a plan on care, but we must also have it as part of public policy. We are now beginning with a strategy. We have the chance now to be part of the specific cabinets in the government, but it's important to go through with this. In 24, we decided in Guatemala that the care was to be an important priority, but that should involve the government and civil society. Now, what do we mean by this? What we have done since last year and during this year has to do with holding workshops, meetings, dialogues at the territorial levels in the 22 departments of the country. And this is involving women's ministry, civil society, and the local governments as well as the municipal departments of women, that is local governments. So we're tackling this topic. And in September, now we have 3 graduates, and one has to do with the women's mechanism that already exists among state agencies, and there is another degree having to do with civil society, and another for municipalities. These careers have to do with the care system. So this is a way to tackle that. But we have an obstacle, and that has to do with the budget. And this event is quite timely because I can hear that the cooperation agencies are involved. So I'm asking that that we communicate in order to be able to receive technical and financial support to strengthen our activities. We would like this in my country to become a public policy on care. Thank you for your attention. Thank you so much. The floor is open.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Mi
Good
nombre
afternoon. I am Karina Paz. I am a researcher from Mexico, and I'm studying at LADES from ECLAC. We have seen that these accomplishments in many countries have had a setback in other countries. I would like to hear about the mechanisms for the continuity of that cooperation. And I'd also like to know whether this has been involving government networks that are so important for the continuity of these goals. Thank you, Karina.
Sala o de forma virtual. Si les parece, entonces, Ana Westmith, damos la palabra.
Anna Westmith, we will give you the floor to respond to these comments. Thank you for your comments. This is an open conversation, and we wish to have a constructive dialogue. Indeed, the last question focuses what we will be doing and talking about in the next panel, that is the sustainability of policies. Sustainability and progressiveness of policies, because human rights should go forward and not backward, and that must be reflected in budgets. The idea is also to get further institutionality to this. And in the next panel, we will have elements related to that. Now, what the project talks about has to do with the making of state policies. And here the multi-player cooperation, public function, civil society, all those involved are equally important. That is why we're making headway on this. Jimena Mariscal talked about the importance of the diplomatic academies and the importance of creating a public function that will truly be consistent with these agreements.
Not only one stakeholder will achieve this, and another thing is to show results. We need to show results how our work in equality benefits societies, and we need to communicate this as well. And all this within a context where the importance of these approaches are being questioned, or where there are different movements. So it's very important to talk about sustainability. I believe that sustainability is also taking these conversations into the regional arena through its regional gender agenda, the regional conference on women in Latin America and the Caribbean, and in one of the most recent subsidiary bodies, which is the South-South Cooperation Agency. I would like to greet Carlos Santos from the Chilean Agency of International Cooperation. He is the appointed regional director. It's important to take this conversation to subsidiary bodies and regional cooperation, which type of cooperation we want, what triangular cooperation we want. how the gender agenda starts changing and evolving according to the new needs of the region. I believe that that is vital to address the regional aspect. And then debate, take all this to the networks of civil society and also the academia, where many people creating public policies are trained, people working on international law. I believe that we are living in a world that is questioning the rules that we obtained in the 20th century. And however, there is a deep clarity on the fact that we need rules, and the rules of the United Nations and the commitments with human rights are vital. I believe that we need more communicative action on the benefits, on the commitment of Tlatelolco, involve men as allies, involve public work as the main axis in this change. With this, I would like to close and move on to the next panel. And I would like to refer expressly to the commitment of Tlatelolco, paragraph 38, because this is the first time that mainstreaming is being mentioned, and this is also the first time that feminist foreign policy is being mentioned. And the commitment is to strengthen gender mainstreaming in foreign policy to promote human rights, peace, and international security, climate action, international cooperation, and sustainable development, even through the adoption of a feminist foreign policy, according to the priorities of each state and the full participation and leadership of women in diplomacy and in the international arena. Feminist foreign policies are not the purpose of this conversation. I believe that we will address that once we talk about foreign policy, international action, and women in diplomacy. However, they have been in place for practically 1 decade, started with Sweden. And today we have more countries involved compared to 10 to 15 years ago. In the global south, Mexico opened this voice from the global south, but I believe that the most interesting thing that we have achieved in terms of cooperation is leaving a legacy of instruments, guidelines, of actions that move towards that idea that substantive equality must be based on due process, the maximum amount of resources available, which is a principle of funding for development of common responsibilities, but also differentiated. And that's why the commitment of Tlatelolco has this vision, and especially focus on collective action. There will not always be a political trend in favor of equality in some countries, but the idea here is to see how collective action can help this and how we can create these commitments that move in that direction. But I believe that with the commitment of Tlatelolco is that we had commitment with funding together. We will be seeing how financial flows move for equality and not only doing things better. We need to, the Minister of Guatemala was saying this, there is a great debate in the region regarding funding. We also have work to do after this mainstreaming guideline. We have one in terms of statistics. This is the second one that we have produced in terms of cooperation, and we're preparing one with the leadership of Nicole that has to do with mainstreaming in taxation and in the tax policy of our countries. Those are the instruments that we're making available. And as Katia was saying, our role is to accompany countries and member states and to make all the positive things happening connect to each other. And that is the objective that we have had in this cooperation. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ana, for your closing remarks. And now we will give the floor to Manuel Novoa, the Director of the Regional Program for Triangular Cooperation with Partners of Latin America and the Caribbean of GIZ. Thank you very much, Nicole. Good afternoon. It is a pleasure to be able to be the moderator on the South-South Cooperation and Triangular Cooperation Working Table. And our goal is to achieve substantive gender equality. I'm here representing the Triangular Cooperation for Latin America and the Caribbean. It is a COPEF project. It is part of the portfolio of regional projects of LAC, and we are most proud of this. I would like to start by thanking, on behalf of the German cooperation, to all of those attending this event, and especially those joining us today that will share their experiences. First, we have Enrique Burtros Marin. Dear Enrique, we recently met in Algeciras, and Enrique is in charge of a position as a delegate in Chile for the Technological Center of Innovation in Spain. Apart from that, we have several online contributions. Sandra Mendoza, the coordinator for mainstreaming feminist foreign policy from the Foreign Affairs Ministry of Mexico, who will talk about the COPEF project and triangular cooperation with gender perspective in the regional agenda on gender, already mentioned by Ingrid and Anna. We also have Noelia Martinez Franci, Ambassador, General Director of Political Affairs and Special Representative for Gender Equality of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Uruguay, who will share the experience of the bi-regional pact on care between Latin America, the Caribbean, and the European Union. We also have Mariana Hernandez, responsible for the South-South cooperation, in charge of building peace of the Presidential Agency of International Cooperation of Colombia, APC, who will be presenting the experience of the South-South cooperation for building peace, called From Colombia to the World. And I know her very well because we worked closely with APC. And this time we have Alessandra Ambrosio, responsible for the multilateral cooperation program of the Brazilian Cooperation Agency. In my opinion, triangular cooperation is a chain between the logic of the North-South cooperation and the South-South cooperation. And the COPEF project is a great example of how this chain is being articulated, and it allows to provide a singular experience that unites countries such as Chile, Colombia, Mexico, Germany, and LAC, with a joint objective of promoting substantive gender equality from a transformative approach that is articulated through a practical community. The project, as it was mentioned by Anna, seeked to strengthen foreign policies and international cooperation of Chile, Colombia, and Mexico. And the work was focused on 4 areas: strengthening feminist foreign policies, gender mainstreaming and international cooperation, development of capacities, and the production of data and statistics. And what Anna was saying is that this project started in 2024 within the framework of the 7th Regional Conference of Triangular Cooperation in Latin America and the Caribbean. And this project was back then considered highly innovative because it was the first triangular project whose main objective was the feminist policy of cooperation for development. This project seeks to operationalize foreign policy and feminist cooperation, and the guidelines that Anna just presented, the tools that she presented, and the training course intend to contribute to close the gaps that there are between commitments in terms of gender equality and their own application. That is the great challenge that we have. This working table allows us to reflect on making these experiences possible. What are the challenges that we see ahead? What are the lessons learned over the last 2 years, and how this can help us to continue transforming it and making it possible over time. I'm inviting you not to look for one single solution, but to contact the different experiences that we have available. I would like to give the floor to each one of the panelists. Please do it in 5 minutes. And to start, Enrique, can you please tell us about the experience of Spain, which is one of the countries that has consolidating gender perspective mainstreaming as a state policy by including it explicitly in Law 1223 of Sustainable Development Cooperation and Global Sustainability. Based on the elements presented by Anna, which contributions and advancements do you identify regarding the integration of gender equality and the cooperation in Spain?
Hola. Muchas gracias.
Hello, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. First of all, I would like to apologize for my ambassador, who was intended to be here. And well, I will now represent my country, Spain. Yes, in fact, Spain
De cooperación en una.
has consolidated its cooperation activity in a law. I would like to thank ECLAC for inviting me to be part of this meeting, because we will be able to show our achievements in substantive gender equality in Spain. Gender perspective mainstreaming and cooperation is not a recent process. It is the result of a process that has been taking place for 20 years and that has allowed to include gender approach to planning, management, follow-up, and evaluation of our cooperation. And as you were saying, has ended in an acknowledgement in Law 2123. Since 2025, our cooperation has worked on gender approach, mainstreaming, and empowerment of girls, women, and adolescents. With this cooperation of sustainable development and global solidarity that defines Spanish cooperation as a feminist cooperation. This trajectory has been important for us because it includes a work strategy. It progressively becomes a structural element of cooperation. This is a commitment established by law. And this law has the objectives of ensuring that women, girls, and adolescents have equal access to basic services that favor their career insertion or in the workplace to decent labor, and also their protection against all types of violence, which leads to the effective participation in all areas of decision, political, and social aspects, acknowledging sexual and reproductive rights of women, girls, and adolescents as a fundamental part of human rights.
As we already said, the important thing is that there be a political regulatory consolidation with a guiding plan for sustainable development and global solidarity for 24 to 27. And this plan brings in the feminist gender focus and it says that equality is a priority. It also says that more than 60% of action in Spanish cooperation want, as a result, a positive impact in gender equality going forward in to full coverage. And this doesn't just involve specific programs on women, but it says that the whole cycle of cooperation should include it in diagnosis, design, allocation of resources, and execution. In December of 95, we have agreed feminist cooperation that was submitted this year. This strategy brings cooperation to tackle structural inequalities of gender, and it wants it to be mainstreamed, trying to have an equal distribution into the future. And there are four pillars: rights, representation, resources, and partnerships. The rights of women and girls, sexual reproductive rights, and the representation from a political and economic standpoint of women in different places of power, more resources to get rid of structural inequalities with the feminist organizations and international organizations. These pillars bring in priorities such as political participation of women, fighting gender violence, reproductive sexual rights, and all other rights. We also have a focus on humanitarian assistance in building peace. This policy is also followed by the need for resources. In between 25 and 28, 260% of the budget of initiatives have been granted in 25. 57% was coming to gender programs, 20% in the main part, and the rest is something significant. And on that same year, 33% of the initiatives having to do with gender were related to getting rid of violence against women and girls and to promote a full participation of women in equal opportunities. I know that this is a very long presentation, but I'd like to say that there are programs now with a 5 million budget to ensure women leader in economic and social spheres. The commitment has to do with humanitarian context, and in this year, 25% of loans are made available for specific projects having to do with humanitarian needs. Now, our cooperation is well known. Between 2015 and 25, Spain has this bring about more than 2 million euro in issues having to do with equality to help strengthen the capability of countries in that. We are supporting the Observatory on Gender Equality. We're also working with UN Women in different initiatives. We support all efforts against violence on women. We also wish to help to eradicate genital issues related to women, and we would like to share our experiences and gain more experiences from Latin America. There are so many things that have been made. We have policies related to women, violence, women cares, but let me share these experiences and send this to you as of 24. The Triangular Cooperation for the region developed 37 interventions in different fields, and some have to do with gender equality. And with El Salvador, we have a project to identify women in risk of femicide. With Bolivia, Paraguay, and El Salvador, there's a program of primary attention for women with uterus cancers. We also have another program for protecting people from sexual exploitation, a program with Argentina for prevention and attention of women that have suffered violence. And with Colombia, Another one to favor access rights to women in rural areas. And we also have another system for the participation of women in public policy. And finally, I'd like to say that in terms of care, one of the priorities that we have has to do with the feminist cooperation from Spain, following the agenda and with organisms with ECLAC, UN Women. And this has to do with our Center for Formation in Montevideo. And there we have a participation of civil society, public agencies, etc. And in short, the Spanish agency believes that we require continuity, commitment, and it should be backed by the regulatory frameworks with planning and resources. That is the process that is followed by a corporation since 2005. And this is follows law as well as the strategy for feminist cooperation. We would like to consider consolidating this with our cooperation so as to have positive results for the benefit of women and girls. Thank you. It's very good to hear about this, and also that in 2023 this was accomplished 20 years, so it's good to know continuity is a must. I heard about the focus whereby the whole cycle of the project must be considered with gender, and the funding is equally important. The 17% increase in resources should reflect a series of examples. Now we continue with Sandra Mendoza from Mexico. She will be talking about the contribution of a triangular cooperation. The experience of COPEX has a strong peculiarity. It aims at relating triangular cooperation with the strengthening of a feminist foreign policy and with the regional gender agenda. The question is, Sandra, how can triangular cooperation contribute to fulfill the cooperation and the inclusion of gender in cooperation and foreign activity? Please go ahead. I'm sorry, but we don't have an audio. I apologize, but we have no audio from the speaker.
Sandra, ¿podrías?
Could you please speak up?
Sí, ahora sí.
I think that yes, we can hear you now. Indeed, please go ahead.
Creo que ahora no nos escuchamos, no los escuchamos nosotros. ¿Sí se escucha? Ok, perfecto. Bueno, confiaremos en que...
Very well. I will proceed. Here we are in Mexico City to follow up a project. This is what we've been doing for the last 2 years from the Secretariat of Foreign Ministry as well as International Cooperation. I also have a colleague from diplomatic studies here. I was saying that this is a pioneer project. It's the first one where we join three countries from Latin America with ECLAC and GIZ to further the gender equality agenda. And we also do hope that this will be useful for other countries. There are many countries in Latin America and the Caribbean that are going through this, some with a feminist foreign policy, but especially with this thrust towards mainstreaming gender into all fields. We do hope that this cooperation project may be useful to reinforce mainstreaming, and as under Tlatelolco in its paragraph number 38. I'd like to quickly go through the cooperation project. Some of this has to do with Anna, what Anna talked about. But let's recall that there were 4 lines of action in this project. On our first line, we strengthened uh, feminist foreign policies. Chile, Colombia, and Mexico were there to strengthen international cooperation, development with a feminist focus, and to strengthen capabilities, capacities related to feminist inclusion in foreign policy in order to help cooperation agencies as well as foreign ministries. And there's a 4th line that has to do with the data collection on what's happening in the member states to strengthen foreign policies and international cooperation amongst feminists. And something that is very, very important, and one of the main products here of the COPEC project has to do with the community of practices. We will then talk about the projects that came from the model framework project. We also have a proposal of conceptual ideas, a toolkit related to gender and international cooperation towards development. We have a virtual training model and a systematization of the progress, participation, and barriers that hinder further participation of women in diplomacy. We also look at the good practices and indicators. We then talk about the community of practices. This is a big result we got. Aside from foreign ministries and cooperation agencies, we had the participation of diplomatic academies and others that have to do with mechanisms for the advancement of women in Mexico. For example, the Ministry of Women. And this was also a place for exchanging experiences, and we countries got together to see what was happening within and how we were making headway with these practices and how this could be useful to inspire other countries to go forward in their foreign policies. There was also a lot of participation where we noticed what were the topics of interest for other countries, but we also emphasized the horizontal nature of the project. All countries took up leading positions. We also held 6 workshops and we looked at how the implementation of that logo was done in national plans or the implementation of a 1325 resolution, women and security, the role of the diplomatic academies, etc.
And several other topics that we covered. I would also like to talk about these issues that we identified as common advancements, where all countries were incorporated substantive gender equality within our frameworks and our action plan strategies. We were setting up institutional structures to coordinate gender perspective and foreign policy and international cooperation for development. where all countries to greater or lower extent had already developed tools, protocols, and training processes for the diplomatic staff. And we also have this active participation in initiatives that are regional and multilateral on gender equality. We were also able to identify these common gaps, such as the lack of robust monitoring systems, evaluations, and specific indicators to measure the implementation of gender perspective in foreign policy. And in international cooperation for development, we also had difficulties to identify and track down budget resources for the agenda on gender, also the unequal implementation abroad in terms of gender perspective, and also something very important that has been identified by the experts of the CEDAW committee. And this was implemented in the observations of the reports. This lack of substantive parity of representation of women in foreign policy and international representation, and mechanisms to follow the gaps of women in diplomacy and international cooperation. These are common gaps, and we were also able to identify strategical advancements. And as the result of this analysis, we saw that we need to consolidate the mainstreaming of gender perspective as state policies complying with international commitments of countries for substantive equal rights of all women, where we want to increase the participation of women in diplomacy, many times through foreign affairs. And there is where in Mexico, we already have affirmative measures in place, both for promotions in the diplomatic careers as well as in entrance. We already have certain results that we could point out for this project. Accountability and the periodical publication of results with focal points and more strong mechanisms of deepening gender approach mainstreaming in all areas of foreign policy. And this is the most important challenge, to make all of these measurable results and sustainable impacts that are reflected in the lives of women, adolescents, and girls in all their diversities. And we're talking about both women in diplomacy, that for the purpose of this project, what we consider as women in diplomacy were women that are part of foreign affairs services, women that are collaborating in the foreign affairs ministries from the different offices, and also women that are in international cooperation for development, and women that are part of international agencies. Now, answering this question, our conclusions of the COPEF project were first, that the project demonstrated that triangular cooperation can be a particularly efficient instrument to make the exchange of experience in institutional capacities into management tools and public policies with gender perspective. The second is that this project allowed us to create collective capacities and not only transfer knowledge, because the project evolved towards a logic of horizontality and shared leadership, co-responsibility, and joint construction of knowledge. Our third conclusion is that the project created knowledge, proposals, and standards for feminist international action and with gender perspective from Latin America. Something that happened in the beginning of this project is that all the references on feminist gender perspective came from European contexts, and this project allowed us to create this knowledge from Latin America, to have references, and with this strengthen our gender regional agenda. Now, thinking about the next steps, because this is not enough, we were reflecting on the fact that we would need to institutionalize advancements, include them in regulatory frameworks, management instruments, funding mechanisms, and institutional procedures that survive administrative changes. because they're in line of this notion of state of meeting international commitments regarding gender affairs. We also need to maintain this practice community that was very effective to build networks and to share these advancements that we were building, and permanent exchange mechanisms to keep these bonds and provide a follow-up to the initiatives developed and strengthen information and evidence, because we cannot transform what cannot be observed. And we see important differences between the mechanisms for collecting data among the different countries. And it is therefore recommendable to strengthen information and evidence to follow up both the institutionalization of foreign policies, as well as international cooperation for development with a gender perspective and a feminist approach. We have Colombia, Chile, Mexico, GIZ, and ECLAC, and we hope that together we can continue advancing as a region so we can see substantive advancements and equality, and that this can be reflected in diplomacy and foreign action, as well as with all women, girls, and adolescents with all their diversities in our region. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Sandra, for saying that triangular cooperation is an efficient instrument and that is capable of creating proposals and gender standards. You have highlighted the importance of the practice community of a horizontal link that allowed to include foreign affairs ministries, diplomatic academies, women's secretariats, etc., to develop together new approaches. You also talked about the lack of data and the need of having mechanisms to follow up the existing gaps and create sustainability. Thank you very much. Now we will continue with Mariana Hernandez, who is joining us from Colombia. Mariana is here with us today to share the experience of the South-South Cooperation Program in Cooperation of Peace from Colombia to the world. The question to you, Mariana, is how is gender perspective incorporated in a South-South cooperation experience for building peace? And which learning experience do you believe is transferable to other contexts? Mariana, can you hear me? Yes. Good afternoon. From the Presidential Agency of Colombia, we would like to thank ECLAC GIZ and all the people that were part of this instance. Thank you very much for the invitation. To answer your question, I would like to tell you briefly what the program is about, from Colombia to the world, and specifically a learning path that we developed within that program called Weaving Equality and Peace, where Amexi is part of, among other countries. The program has been led from 2024 with the Presidential Agency of International Cooperation of Colombia, and it currently gathers more than 50 entities of the state and civil society organizations in our country. We have more than 11 countries in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. And it starts with the idea that Colombia has experiences and lessons that have been built after decades of armed conflict, and that those lessons can be useful for other contexts in which there are challenges related to peace and security. This context for the program, and with all these good practices and lessons that we have obtained, we would like to share these lessons, but that does not mean exporting solutions, but making available knowledge and lead to instances so that partner countries can build their own paths. It is within this context where in November 2025, we started the learning path, Weaving equal peace, which is the second of 4 that we have promoted around different exchange areas. But this route was specifically focused on strengthening capacities for the participation of women in peace processes. That route connected 7 countries in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. As I was saying, in Mexico, we had Mozambique, Cameroon, Nigeria, the Philippines, the Republic of Congo, and Guatemala through very specific demands for knowledge that started with their own specific contexts. Some demands were focused on DDR issues, others had to do with the participation of women in art, and all these peace culture processes, among others. And within the specific area of exchange, which is strengthening the capacities of women, there were 3 exchange lines defined. One had to do with the follow-up to commitments and the construction of indicators to measure advancements in women's rights. The second one had to do with the participation of women in justice processes of truth and the disappeared. And the third one had to do with reincorporating women that have been part of the construction of hostilities as combaters. However, from these learning processes, as I mentioned, the program didn't start with the idea that Colombia had an answer to certain questions that other countries had. But our intention was to lead to a discussion among peers. And here something very valuable happened. It was acknowledged that the lessons obtained from public entities, from the academia, from the private companies and social organizations and the different territories had the same validity. And that is why we linked different organizations of women to this learning paths that have been part of institutions such as the Special Jurisdiction for Peace, the Commission on Truth, the unit of the searching for disappeared persons, those that have suffered the impacts of war, and also people that at some point had the status of commenters. And to answer the question, the first thing that we obtained from this experience is that we do not want to transfer a single view of what it means to participate for women. We want to extend the universe of possibilities so that women can imagine for themselves what it means to be part of public policies intended for peace and security. It is clear that a conversation between women's organizations from Mozambique, the Philippines, or Guatemala, or women in Colombia cannot benefit this, cannot say this is how you should participate. What we want to do is show how we have built that path so that each country can adapt it to its own context.
Now, secondly, another lesson learned has to do with the conditions that made it possible to build good practices. And on the road, we shared methodologies, lessons learned, so that these methodologies could be reinterpreted and adapted to different contexts. Thus, it's not just exporting solutions, but creating conditions. And the third thing we have learned has to do with the relevance whereby through technical cooperation we may promote the meeting of women from different parts of the globe. We do realize that the organizations don't just need to know methodologies or to have different tools or different knowledges, but this also allows for an organization to find another way to um, um, face difficulties. And this, I think, can be transforming. Links are very important. We must know everything has to do with all the different means of going about something. So these are links that must be web, and these are the ones that will help each situation. The first thing then, to summarize, the first learning has to do with horizontality, recognizing that everybody and the organizations, including academia, have different and important things to share. Secondly, it's more important, rather than replicating, opening up new roads, creating new conditions so that each context may define the road that they are going to tackle. And thirdly, we believe it's important to invest in strengthening links between base organization, women's organization, through technical cooperation. Because precisely these are the ways to build confidence, trust, and to copy the main references that they like. So the important thing then is to work within the framework of the South-South cooperation between Colombia and the rest of the world. Thank you very much. Thank you for the clear recognition that it's not just exporting solutions, but creating the way for each country to find its own learning means. And we hear that there are many ways to participate in peace and security. We must expand that term. The conditions are important to create good practices. And also, technical cooperation should promote horizontality to create means to get the meaning between women's networks in different regions and different countries. Thank you, Mariana. We hand over now to Alessandra Ambrosio. She is connected from Brazil. I'd like to ask you, Alessandra, what are the opportunities and challenges identified to be including systematically gender in international cooperation and from your standpoint? You have the word. You have the floor. We can't hear you. Would you please speak up? We don't know, still don't know whether you're on or not. I'm afraid we cannot hear you. Cannot hear you.
Qué lástima.
This is really a shame.
Vamos a pasar a la próxima panelista.
We will then hand over to the next panelist, and in the meantime, we hope that you will get a good signal. We now hand over to Noelia Martinez Franchi from Uruguay, and she will bring in the experience of the bi-regional pact for care in Latin America and the Caribbean and EU. The question I have is, as of the experience from this regional pact, what do you believe should be included in international cooperation so that it may truly help out to transform the structural inequalities that are related to care? You have the floor, Noelia. Thank you, Manuel. Can you hear me? Good. I thank LAC and GIZ for the invitation to participate in this event and for the chance to talk about the biregional pact of care between Latin America and the Caribbean and EU. This is something of the utmost importance for Paraguay, for Uruguay, and the care agenda is amongst our priorities. And as the pro tempore chair of CELAC for this year, we are also allocating priority to this agenda. Now, as those who preceded me well said about the importance of gender for the region, equally the care agenda is something that uh, uh, where we have participated a great deal from this region, contributing with the debate. We know that Tlatelolco has made progress, and this is something, though, that has been developing for many years, and recognizing that care is not just something that is a family affair, as Anna well said, but we also believe that talking about care means talking about many things, such as autonomy. And during the regional conference on population development last week in Montevideo, we talked a great deal about how responsibilities for caring are distributed mainly between women, and that hinders her true participation of participating in the labor markets. That is why change in the social organization of care also means a change in the structures that reproduce gender inequalities. Here, we are very happy about what has been achieved by Tlatelolco, because that has been reinforcing international cooperation's role and foreign policy to go forward in this endeavor. For us, the bi-regional pact for care offers an opportunity to go forward in the substantive gender equality, especially with the tension that we're facing in many means, multilateral space of cooperation will help to grant the continuity that is so needed in our policies, to maintain consensus, to preserve what has already been accomplished, and also holding dialogue on that kind of topic. For us, the experience we've had on this by regional pact has been very fruitful. The first thing that we find deserves mentioning here is to be able to maintain this agenda as part of the political dialogue between the two regions. This is very useful to see what we already have and how we can go forward, how to share the view of both regions on that subject. This pact, though, goes beyond the specific care cooperation. It sets up a concrete channel in social aspects, having human rights perspective in a field that is not just related to economic cooperation. That is why we insist on the importance of having this impact implemented and that the two regions may work together in this matter. The bi-regional pact involves many dimensions, but to give priority to this agenda that has to do with social protection, sustainability, etc., what we have done has to do with looking at the focal points, and there we have held a couple of concrete meetings, both virtual and in presence, and there we have talked about the importance of facing these challenges together and naturally leveraging the care agenda. The first meeting that we had in Berlin in May this year that was followed by a dialogue amongst all players had to do with the concern we share in the two regions. For example, in talking about the changing of our population, the need of care, and the unequal distribution of responsibilities, and the importance of having sustainable care systems with decent labor conditions for caregivers. We thus set up 4 working groups so that we may then go forward in this bi-regional pact. Always having in mind the difficulties that we've already talked about. On the one thing, for example, has to do with the funding for continuity in time. Secondly, the importance of paid and unpaid work in the care society. And there's also the task that should be seen as a job. And also what has to be done throughout the lifetime of the persons and the possibility of holding a cultural change, which is possibility that should go through the whole agenda.
Currently, Uruguay is co-chairing the working group related to care workers. And addressing one of the questions that were asked in the previous panel, it is highly related not only to adolescent work, but also migratory issues, which is a reality that we're trying to face in the region when we talk about care and decent labor, and also social protection, of course. Here, in international cooperation, we believe that it has a lot to contribute. It is a matter of sharing experiences to provide several lessons so that we can all together promote development, connect specialized institutions, developed methodologies and tools that can allow us to face these challenges and build capacities that can remain installed in our countries. There's no doubt that to achieve this, a crucial element is funding, not only for care systems, but fundings for this regional initiative to continue existing and continue advancing. The consensus on the importance of care, the right to care, the need to advance towards comprehensive systems exists, and we all share this in the region. But now we need to translate this common interest in this consensus in sustainable and long-term policies that can allow us to continue advancing. That is why it is important to mobilize resources, explore instruments, funding instruments, innovative instruments, and mostly obtain the support in this process, not only of the involved countries, but the agencies that have worked very hard on these issues, and of course, of international cooperation agencies. The importance of continue building knowledge and evidence of having more data. And this is something that Anna mentioned. This is important to have in this bi-regional pact to try to advance, produce, examine not only the needs that we have, but also the conditions in which care takes place, the territorial gaps, the results of the different policies, to actually contribute to shed more light on the information available, to have comparable methodologies, systematize experiences. Undoubtedly, all of this will allow us to make better public policy decisions. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Noelia, because you have shown how the care agenda leads to international contributions, and it allows us to sustain consensus and continuity in these topics, also maintain political dialogue within the two regions. Now, due to time, we will give you the opportunity to make a contribution or a comment. Brazil. So, Alexandra, are you there? Maybe we can try again.
Sí, es una lástima, pero no la vemos acá en...
Well, it is a shame, but we cannot see her on the screen. What I would like to propose is for us to open the floor to a contribution here in the room. If any of you would like to add anything or would like to convey a message, or if you would like to comment on the contributions that were made.
Alessandra, ¿estás ahí ahora?
Alessandra, are you there?
A ver, probemos, Alessandra.
Sí, sí, me oyen.
Can we try? Can you hear me? Yes, we can. Excellent. We're so glad to hear you. But we cannot see you. However, we can hear you. The important thing is for us to hear what you have to say. Now we can see you as well.
Muchas gracias,
Thank you very much. And well, good afternoon to all of you. It is a great joy to be sharing this instance with colleagues from our region and add the perspective of Brazil to this conversation. I would like to especially greet my colleagues and also LAC and GIZ for the invitation. I believe that there is a very important word for the question that we're being asked. because right now the challenge is not only about acknowledging that gender equality must be present in international cooperation. There is a broad framework of international and regional commitments and these issues, as we have seen. The actual challenge is a different one. How can we make gender perspective stop depending on a specific initiative and a certain project, or even from the awareness of certain people, and for it to become part of the way in which our institutions conceive and perform cooperation? That is the Brazilian experience, and specifically of the Brazilian Agency for Cooperation. With this, I would like to highlight 3 challenges and 3 opportunities. The first challenge is institutional. There is still a gap in terms of capacities to work on mainstreaming for gender policies and their intersectionalities, including the dimensions of race, which is a very important topic for Brazil, age, and territory. And this gap does not only exist in our national institutions, we see it as well to different extents in multilateral spaces of international cooperation. And when we talk about capacities, we're not only talking about technical capacities. We are talking about institutional capacities and political capacities, structures, procedures, human resources, coordination mechanisms, and of course, willingness and institutional support. The second challenge is moving from commitment to practice. Mainstreaming gender cannot be simply including an additional paragraph on gender equality in a project's profile. It means asking ourselves from the beginning, who will be part of the creation of this initiative? Who will be benefited from it? Which inequalities can be reduced or reproduced? Which indicators are we going to use? How will we measure the results achieved? And which human institutional resources do we have available? This is, gender perspective must be present during the entire cycle of cooperation. This challenge is well in line with the efforts of LAC, led to transform the regional guidelines in specific tools for the different phases of the programs and cooperation projects. The next challenge is probably more conceptual. Is avoiding for gender equality to be enclosed in specific projects for women and girls and gender equality affairs. All of the topics, not only those that I have mentioned, but also others such as health, digital transformation, public administration, and sustainable development, are not neutral aspects from the point of view of gender. That's why mainstreaming also involves changing the way in which we look at the challenges of social and economic development. In my opinion, there is where we find opportunities. The first is the South-South and triangular cooperation, as mentioned by the people that talked before I did. We have examples of partnership with UN Women or other institutions and instruments. where gender affairs are present. The second opportunity is in the potential of multilateral cooperation to transform institutions. And here I would like to briefly mention an experience from Brazil that is highly illustrative. Gender equality for public institutions. In Brazil, this methodology has been implemented by great public institutions. The Secretariat of the National Treasury, the General Union, the Accounts Tribunal of the Union, Public Services, and also the Public Prosecutor's Office. They are very different institutions, but they have something in common. They are capable of moving changes towards other areas, and we have very specific results. For instance, the Accounts Tribunal of the Union, the application of the methodology showed a significant evolution. In October 2024, the institution only reached 35% of the parameters established in the methodology. In its final preliminary assessment, it reached 35 points in a scale of 100, with the 5 assessed areas. Another example is the reduction of costs of judicial cases of the union's office between 2022 and 2025 were the years where the greatest level of gender equality were achieved in leadership positions. Trillions of reals were devoted to these cases. For us, this experience shows something very important. Multilateral cooperation can lead to an effect that goes well beyond the project. It can reproduce the transformation of institutions that similarly transform public policies. And this leads me to a third opportunity. And this is in my main message. I believe that we need to build a virtuous cycle between the states and the multilateral systems. On the one hand, we must strengthen capacities within our own states to mainstream gender perspective and provide a greater visibility and effectiveness to international commitments that we have undertaken. On the other hand, we need to transform the same capacities within multilateral spaces and organizations. Countries can provide their experiences, demands, and lessons to multilateralism. And multilateral organizations can, in turn, provide countries with knowledge, methodologies, tools, and institutional capacities. That movement needs to work both ways. If we manage to do so, gender perspective stops being an additional component of cooperation and becomes part of the way in which we conceive all international cooperation. And I believe that this is ultimately the objective that we all share for our international commitments, for our cooperation projects, for our institutions to be translated into specific projects and changes in the lives of all people with all their diversities. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Alessandra Ambrosio. from ABC Brazil. Thank you very much.
We are now about to close this panel. So we now hand over for the closing remarks. Thank you. And before anything, I'd like to thank all of the panelists who were here with us during this dialogue and who have brought their own experiences in this regional meeting. We have also had the participation of 17 governments, both in presence as well as virtually. We have also had representatives from UN and other international organizations, corporation agencies, representatives from civil society, from the academia, amongst others. We are very thankful for that participation. All of the material will be made available for your own interests. This afternoon, we have heard about promising practices to include gender perspective, and this is changing the way we have understood international cooperation so far. This is something that has been mentioned often here. This transformation has been occurring during the last 10 or 15 years. It's a structural change. We talked here about shared challenges. Today's dialogue confirms the importance of the community of practices, triangular cooperation, South-South cooperation, and how to share the challenges will strengthen capacity and will help out decision making. This meeting is also a landmark for all of us under COPET after 3 years of cooperation and shared efforts. This has been seen as a pioneer experience for triangular cooperation. And I hadn't reflected on this so much about Mexico, Colombia, and Brazilian words tell us that feminism brings in not just an end, but a method, an international kind of method that looks for transformation from local to regional to international and the other way around. It's a method based on horizontal processes and a relation between peers aiming at holding a constructive dialogue, as the convention itself says, to eliminate all kinds of inequalities and discriminations between towards women. In Mexico, for example, it's lovely to look at the foreign ministry in Mexico, the diplomatic academy, and processes that are being followed, processes that are difficult, as we heard from the representative from ABC, Alexandra Ambrosio. We want this to become an organizational culture, but that's not yet happening. Looking for these processes has been very important. We're creating now this community of practices throughout these years, and soon we will share the way this initiative is being systematized and how, under Mexico's leadership, this is becoming very important. Looking at the women in diplomacy, I am very thankful on this road, and I love this as it is said in Colombia. I really enjoy this. It's a tremendous contribution. We're not just talking about instruments or technology or tools, we're talking about routes in the pursuit of knowledge and learning. I'd like to thank the governments from Chile, Mexico, Colombia, their foreign ministries, their cooperation agencies as well, for this joint work to share progress, dreams, opportunities in this regional construction. Germany, we appreciate the German cooperation GIZ that has shown how the feminist focus can bring in a radical change in the way cooperation is done. And we also thank GIZ that made this possible through the Regional Fund for Triangular Cooperation with partners from Latin America and the Caribbean. And as I was saying, GIZ with the technical cooperation, we thank you for your trust that has been so helpful. Barbara, Katia, Manuel, the team involved. Thank you all. And let me say that extremely valuable has been the work with subsidiary organs. I thank Chile, chairing the South-South Cooperation and the Secretariat of ECLAC. We especially thank them for their collaboration to help out with this, especially Luis Yanez and Enrique Oviedo for being with us in this consultation in Mexico that chairs the regional conference on women in Latin America and the Caribbean. This is really a virtuous circle that we believe may also reach other subsidiary ECAC organizations. I also thank Devana de la Puente here with us for the contribution during the process, especially in the preparation of the document on guidelines, as well as the systematization that we will submit to you later on. And I also thank the tremendous team from the gender division here that I am honored to lead. Nicole Villamin, Nicole Bustos, Visalia, Juan Peralta, Rodrigo, from Salazar, all have followed us in the team. And these are some that have been more involved. It's been lovely to be here with us. We have been following from the beginning how we thought about the scores, how we thought this should be organized. Let me say that South-South and Triangular Cooperation has a tremendous potential to push forward joint solutions for promoting collective action. And it also supplements the bilateral and multilateral cooperation. This has been a clear example. The Ambassador Noelia Martinez brought to us, and this is the bilateral, bi-regional pact for this kind of cooperation. We're talking about the 9 countries that already have laws on this topic. This also leads to a bi-regional coordination with Europe, and this starts with bilateral funds, multi-regional funds, and we hope that many triangular projects will come about in the future. It can also help us to answer questions. We left Montevideo last week with an important question together with JIZ, and that is how to fund long-term care in the region, because in this region we still do not have a universal social protection. So how do we will respond to this aging population in the region? Or indeed, the question that was behind the project, how to build a feminist policy, or how to mainstream gender as of Latin America and the Caribbean, when what to bring into Germany and other EU countries. Right now, we are facing times when we must also celebrate our successes. I enjoy these presentations because we have to celebrate the good things that have been happening. Because, okay, we every day face pain, we face violence, but the vocation in this region, coming from the base of the ground root organizations from different cultures, organizations of women and feminist women, this has been a vocation. So that multilateralism may build peace, equality, development, and cooperation has much to contribute to our countries. And these agendas sometimes are not at the center of the political debate or of fiscal allocations, but they should be there because the sustainability of life is so important, as well as the care of lives and of our planet. I also want to say that this collaboration, this region, has led this into severe commitment that was approved in the fourth conference on funding for development. And there, for the first time, we see the recognition of the need to invest in the care economy and to mainstream gender in the agenda towards development. And this is part of the contribution of the regional conference on women has been precisely more articulation between financing and cooperation. And I will finish off bringing words of hope. Our region has agreements, has capabilities, multi-player partnerships, and more public officials who are being part of this change, together with the historic track of the civil society movements and new and also the contribution from the academia. So we have words of hope, but not to wait. And I repeat this idea. We have reasons to be hopeful, but not to wait. That is why what we started in August last year must find us working together to change agreements into better decisions, into more solid institutions with a corporation that can guarantee rights, autonomy of women in its full diversity, and going forward in substantive equality. As a VECLAC, we will accompany you in this road with dialogue, with the following up, with creating evidence, learning amongst peers, and strengthening the network of cooperation between institutions and countries. Let us continue going forward towards the substantive equality and with a care system, with global, regional, local efforts so that this may all come true. We count on all of you from wherever you may be with your ideas. This is something new. So as the poem says, we make our roads walking forward. Thank you very much for your attention.
Le damos la palabra.
Now we would like to give the floor to Barbara Schultz from the Strategic Alliance of ECLAC. Thank you very much, Nicole, Anna. I won't read what my team prepared. I believe that it is already late. We have listened to many people. So please allow me a couple of words before closing the session. After listening to all the contributions in this session, I believe that between 2023 and 2024, we opened a window of opportunity. We had a favorable correlation between interest, support, decision, and leadership from different countries on working on feminist cooperation and foreign policy. And since 2023, when the project was prepared, until its inception for its implementation in 2024, we have experienced ups and downs. And we have seen that we need to embrace these opportunities, but we must also have the capacity of making them longstanding. And for this, they need our efforts and motivation to continue walking through this path, even if the situation changes. I would like to thank all of you. Ana, you have mentioned names, countries, and I would like to join you on thanking the participation. And we have some lessons and conclusions that I have taken from all of your contributions in this session. The first one is that this has been an effort that implies bringing an idea into practice. I see this process as a process strongly directed towards implementation. It is not a matter of getting to the what to the how, an idea to practice with implementation tools. This is the specifics and what is special of this process and what joined us in this path of saying we want to make this idea that we have been sharing for a long time an actual reality. Second, we have explored working methodologies. As you said, we do not only have a shared objective, but a way of doing things. And it has been hard. It is not something that took place from the beginning. It has been done through a joint effort by working on this commitment with this horizontality, by working in peers. Someone mentioned co-responsibility. And it has been truly exceptional to see the commitment and perseverance of those involved in the process, both people and institution involved in the meetings, fighting for new ways of working with co-responsibility and horizontality. That, to me, has been highly motivating. We have been in massive meetings in each country with representatives from the different agencies, from the ministries, and keeping up with perseverance, believing in the process, and exploring new technologies of horizontality with the contribution of all of us has made the shared experience become a shared path. I would like to highlight an additional aspect. You have mentioned this, Anna. Germany was part of this process. Germany participated in this process in the event held in April 2025, where after the results of the elections, we saw that the situation was changing. We got together in April with the Foundation of Science and Policies in an environment with participants of different ministries in Germany, embassies in Latin America, and we have shared the experience of looking for different answers, considering the change in the political situation. We see that there are changes, but we also see continuity. There are international commitments on gender equality that remain. And I believe that this has been motivating to see that things continue their path, that they remain in the hearts and in the minds of people. And I believe that for triangular cooperation, including Germany not only as a facilitator, but as a country, as institutions that share lessons, is a result of this process that is worth highlighting. Several people mentioned the importance of this process or how special it has been for ECLAC to be part for the first time of a triangular cooperation. So what is special about this? What is the contribution of including LAC into this triangular cooperation? It is that we have a joint learning experience between countries that we're moving into a regional level. We even have the opportunity to take it from a regional to a global debate thanks to the United Nations system. And this is due to the institutionality offered by LAC with its intergovernmental instances such as the International Conference on Women South-South Cooperation and how those are articulated with member countries, but also with global processes led by the United Nations system. And this allows us to sustain political transformation processes beyond the situation of specific countries, and it allows us to broaden the debate and those involved in the process. That is what I wanted to highlight. I would like to give you some content and visibility of the contribution of including LAC in this project. So those were my 4 lessons that I wanted to share regarding the process. I would like to thank you very much for the contributions, for those sharing their experiences, to Sandra for her overview on COPEF, the different components, results, and outputs, and also the rest of the participants. I won't name each one of you individually because we could stay here for a long time, but this has shown us how, through this process, we have entered new processes that we will continue working on, such as those regarding care with LAC, with Colombia, with specific processes on work with gender equality. So I believe that I should stop here. I improvised, but I wanted to express this to you today. Thank you very much for staying with us until now. I believe that we have put our entire hearts in the process. So thank you very much. Thank you very much, Laura Schultz, for these closing remarks. Thank you very much for joining us today on the South-South Triangular Cooperation event for gender equality in Latin America and the Caribbean. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, we will take a photo in the room, so please come to us. And thank you very much to all the authorities present either here or online. It has been a pleasure. Thank you very much.